because I think they say to wait a year, don't they? Because even if all the stars align within a single month, is it only 20-25% chance you'll actually get pregnant if the stars align?
So we had been trying for 9 months at that point when I went for my first semen analysis, and the results came back that I did have sperm, but it was low sperm, low motility. So they kind of said, you could keep on trying, but you are unlikely to conceive naturally.
And we're rolling. Welcome to the Parenting Truths podcast. Today I'm joined by dad of identical twins, male infertility blogger and IVF coach, Frank Fallon. Thanks for joining me, Frank.
Thanks very much for having me, Tom. Great to be here.
So before we explore all of the amazing work you do with other dads, can we sort of dive into your own personal journey as a parent, just so we have some context of where you are today? So could you take us right back to sort of the moment you and your partner decided you'd like to start a family and sort of how things progressed naturally from there?
Yeah, happy to. So my partner and I, we met sort of 10 years ago. Had quite the life. We started dating, and then I moved to Tanzania for a year. We stayed in touch, and I came home at one point as well to kind of come and meet her, and then she joined me at the end of the trip out there, and then moved in together soon after kind of returning to England. And we started to have conversations at that point about obviously family and everything else. My partner's a bit younger than I am, so she had a bit more time with the classic kind of body clock and whatnot. We were sort of thinking ahead and thinking that it was as simple as kind of like, right, 5-6 years time, we'll have a place of our own, and then we'll be able to start a family. Both thinking that was the easiest thing in the world, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's what everyone assumes, isn't it? Like, right, we'll have 2 kids, 2 years apart. They'll be best of friends.
Let's get the job sorted out. Let's get the house, and once we've got a space big enough, then we can just start a family at the click of our fingers. And unfortunately, sort of as we started to try, it kind of became apparent that it was taking slightly longer. And I think, given that we had kind of thought, we'll start a family, and it will be at this point will be really a good time for us. That as it got to sort of 6-7 months, we were reading up on things about how long it usually takes families to have a child, and so then it kind of become a bit more about, well, is there something wrong? But at the time it was kind of just thinking that we were in it together. We really wanted children. And so it was kind of the discussions. I'm really fortunate that like the discussions were kind of a good open space for me to be able to, is there something wrong? Let's go and both get checked out, just to kind of tick that box off. And
at what point did that come? Well, obviously you said after 6 or 7 months of trying, because I think they say to wait a year, don't they? Because even if all the stars align within a single month, is it only 20-25% chance you'll actually get pregnant if the stars align? But then did you wait a year, or was it at 6 and 7 months you actually said, right, let's go and get checked?
I think we had some friends that we were close to that were also trying, and they had contacted NHS and were told 18 months. And I think that's hit or miss depending on where you are. Wait for 18 months and then come and see us. And we kind of wanted to, again, rule it out. So I actually phoned up and said, we've been trying for over a year. And they booked me in for a semen analysis. Again, I kind of went into it really confident that there wouldn't be anything wrong, that this was in fact just to kind of, rule it out entirely. And so it was, we had been trying for 9 months at that point when I went for my first semen analysis. And the results came back that I did have sperm, but it was low sperm, low motility. So they kind of said, you could keep on trying, but you are unlikely to conceive naturally. And that they kind of said, the next appointment, we'd love to have you back and like start looking into kind of IVF.
And would you be entitled to IVF right off the bat in that case with the NHS, or?
Yeah, so our postcode allowed us for one cycle. Um,
Okay.
and we, yeah, I mean, it was a weird thing, and I guess this is like my whole the process then became about our next steps, and stopped thinking about at the end of it we were going to have little children, hopefully, or a little child. And it was all very much just let's get through this. And it kind of, yeah, we went along for the meeting, and then explored whether it was going to be suitable to do NHS or private. We actually had a friend that had gone through the NHS, and they missed an important day or an important bit of medication or an important visit or something, and it meant that the cycle they missed out on that first cycle and had to like do another one. So
Right.
we had that in mind, and actually we were very lucky in the sense that our parents were able to support us financially. So we actually explored private. Again, we were thinking about the timings and just thinking that we wanted to know when it was going to happen. It was at the back end of COVID, so we knew that it wasn't going to be kind of urgent care for the NHS to do, in which case, if
Yeah.
anything was going to get moved, it was going to be ours. So we were at that point as well, like my partner and I, as much as we're very clear headed about certain things, the whole point then was we were very stressed out, and it was kind of what we needed was just to be sure of dates, sure of timings. And so we went down the route of private, and first
Yeah.
round, yeah, was successful through the
Okay.
clinic that we went to. And so, yeah, we only had to do one cycle. I got 9 embryos, and we had the conversation at the beginning about, if I'm infertile, do we want to have the chance of two? And we completely ruled it out and thought, parenting's going to be difficult to manage two. It's probably best to, there's all sorts of health complications as well for the mum. So we kind of said, let's just transfer one embryo. And because it was private, went for some early checkups. Went in, I think, for one scan, and it was one healthy baby, one healthy heartbeat, which was absolutely amazing, a miracle, given the circumstances. And then the next one that we went for, which was 8 weeks, was one healthy baby, one healthy heartbeat. But hold on, I think there's someone else in here, and then moved the camera along, and it turned out that there were two. So our embryo had split. Um,
Oh wow.
yeah, and we had twins on the way.
And how was the process for your partner? Because it can be quite intensive for the female going through IVF, can't it?
Yeah, this was the thing. I mean, it became. I've actually done a bit of stand-up comedy about the whole thing fairly recently,
Okay.
because as the male infertility factor, I had to attend 2 appointments, and my partner took the brunt of it. And I think, the fact that she had to go to work, she was going to appointments before work. There's all the mental aspect as well, the thinking
Yeah.
about what could go wrong, the timings of it. Take this at this time, make sure you're drinking this, take that at that time. If anything happened, the whole worry and everything else, plus the actual going to things before and after work. And she's got quite a stressful job as well. So yeah, it was a lot, and all I could do really was kind of do some drop-offs or pickups, if she was going into London, or make sure that there was dinner, check in on appointments, and try and have a diary as well, so that it wasn't all on her. But yeah, very apparent that ultimately it's all on her. So yeah, it was a really challenging time, but one that we were, again, the reason why we went private was so that this is what you need to do at this time, come here and do this. And there was never a risk of an appointment being swapped over or changed or anything, so we had the kind of bare minimum, that we knew that we needed to do.
And in terms of, obviously, sorry for being naive, but in terms of IVF, would it have been the quality of care you obviously received privately would obviously have been a lot higher than the NHS, like you say, because meetings could get moved, appointments could get moved, and things like that on the NHS.
Really difficult to say, Tom, because I mean, we had, like, now afterwards, I've tried processing a lot since we've had children, and actually, I'm still having. I've just returned for an NHS appointment today, because I was trying to understand what the reason why I was infertile is, and that's still, they're
Okay.
now 18 months old, and I'm still trying to chase a reasoning, um, just in case at one point in the future, if we do decide we want children again, could we conceive naturally? And
So you're
actually,
not
I
given
think I've done.
any. you're not given any reasoning. It's literally just the percentage chance you could conceive naturally is 10% or 1%.
Yeah, it
And that's
really
it.
is. That meeting is okay. Yeah, male infertility factor, low sperm, low motility. We recommend IVF, and it's well, why? What's happened? And it could be anything. And they can do some tests, kind of genetics. They can do chromosomal testing. They can do what they should do is an ultrasound if it's male infertility factor, because that can be linked to cancer. But again,
Okay.
appointments and everything else, if they can just get you to attend an IVF appointment and kind of go along with that, then they do. And I think I'm doing a lot of work. The reasoning for the kind of beta twin dad stuff is because I'm looking into people that don't advocate for themselves. And in that meeting, if I just took it as IVF is the next step, have children, that's it. I could be completely content with that. But I've been trying to understand the reasoning why. And I think from part of that, I've kind of understood that there's lots going on in the fertility world, because it is all really hit or miss. Like, you can get the NHS and it can be completely wonderful. The journey can be clear, no missed meetings or anything else. And you can get clinics that, again, the same, but alternatively, like vice versa, you can have NHS, it doesn't work out, and clinics, it doesn't work out for one reason or another as well. So I don't think that it's a guarantee, obviously, with clinics. And actually, I only know from my treatment with them, but I think there's lots of different stresses in terms of costing, in terms of what to expect, when to expect it. And I think with the clinic, the biggest one is kind of a financial burden that, maybe there is not clear from the beginning as to what you're going to get. And obviously, if you're stressed already because you might not be able to conceive or have children, that then add in a kind of unexpected bill here and there is not helpful either. There's that whole bit on do men talk? I work in the mental health sector, and then this is another element of it. And so once, if it is male infertility factor, do you then go off and speak to anyone about it? Do you have a opportunity to chat? It's something that you have to very carefully who you select to tell and when. And I know, like, I picked off a couple of mates to sort of tell them individually what I was going through, but you have to build up to it, because no one's just checking in and, hi, how are you, how's your fertility? It's kind of all has to be calculated. And I think when you do it in the group setting, which I did later on, I shared one of my blogs with, like, my home mates WhatsApp, and one of them replied from Jaffa to Gaffer. we're in our late 30s now, and it's kind of like, those are the kind of jokes which can really put someone down. Ultimately, I'm content and happy talking about it. But yeah, in this, I think now is, and the work that I'm doing is because lots of, you're passed from pillar to post, but there's opportunities for doctors to be able to ask how men are, and I don't think it happens too often. So obviously I don't know from the female side, but it's kind of 50-50 that you can be infertile for either female factor or male factor, and it is, I think, 50-50. And in infertility, 50% or half and half or whatever. But yeah, I think that from talking to different dads, there's not many that kind of feel comfortable speaking out. Although when they hear other people telling their journeys, it's obviously very inspiring, and you understand then that you're not alone, and that can be the kind of catalyst for sharing your issues and challenges, I think.
And what do you think holds men back from not sharing or not talking about infertility specifically?
God, I don't know. It's really difficult. Like I say, like the job that I'm doing at the moment, I lead a project where we support people with mental health conditions to find and sustain employment. So in that situation, if male or female out of a job, like, sometimes the female will be far more open about it with friends, with previous colleagues, with their networks. And I think for men, it's very much still, even though we're getting to a point now where there's a lot more sharing, it's in the mainstream media. I forget the stats, but there's a lot more kind of male suicides than there are female. And that can come from a point of, not sharing, not talking, not having any of those, or feeling opportunities to talk. And I think with infertility, again, like I say, like, I went for a semen analysis. You walk in, you make your semen, you make your sample, you give that to the nurse, and then you leave. And there was no conversation from the nurse about how I was feeling, no information, no advice, no places to find anybody to speak to about it. And I think that it is a very intimidating place to go to. And I think ultimately, obviously, for a lot of men, if you are successful in one round of IVF, then ultimately you've done what was needed, and so you don't need to kind of talk about it. You've got children now, and it was only because obviously I wanted to know. I really wanted to understand. I don't know whether that comes from a point of working in the mental health sector, that I kind of felt more of a willingness to speak up and speak out, and really trying to find the reasonings why. But yeah, I just think it's got a bit of a waffle. But I mean, I think ultimately we're still just trying to make sure that it's a normalised and not a taboo topic. And that actually, by talking about it, you then start to process it, like everything. And that can be with a trained counsellor, an IVF coach, that can be on a podcast, or whatever else. So I think that's where my kind of process in all of this was speaking on different places, and from that learned what questions I should be asking, and hence 2 years on I'm still looking for a diagnosis.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why I was keen to speak to you, because I'm sort of immersed in the parenting space on social media, and male infertility accounts or people speaking about male infertility isn't something I come across that often. And I don't know if it's because maybe I don't follow the accounts or I'm not immersed in the world, but as someone in that world, are there lots of people talking about it? Oh, there are. Okay.
Well, it's definitely growing. And I mean,
Right.
so mine, when did we do it? Was a year and nearly 2 years ago. And I was actually off social media at the time because of all the stress and everything. I didn't want to be on social media and have added, weight.
Yeah.
And I was looking for spaces. When I finally went back on, there were groups on Facebook, but obviously it's not kind of talked about that much. There is now a male fertility podcast, which good friends Kieran and Sean, or Knackered Knackers, are doing, and that's into its second season. There's also Test Him, which are doing wonderful things, and they've just opened up their own studio. But before that, it was all shared. So there's a podcast called the Fertility Podcast, and that had occasional kind of male guests on. So even now, there's a couple, maybe a few different podcasts. But if you think about all of the different kind of mental health, the different female fertility podcasts, it's not a lot.
With Facebook groups specifically, people need to be quite intentional, like they're going there for a reason. I think the good thing about Instagram, because it's quite digestible content, it's great for awareness. So obviously you might be reaching dads that need your content, but you might be reaching people that are trying for a baby, or just a lad that's thinking about starting a family. It maybe runs into a little bit of issues and then leans on your content from there. It's obviously a different perspective, but we've experienced quite a lot of loss through starting our family, and I throw in lots of content around loss into my usual content, and people come to me who have maybe experienced a miscarriage or a stillbirth and have said the fact that I read your content a year ago and we're now faced with this traumatic time now, it's made that transition a lot easier. I think it's really important to reach those who maybe aren't seeking the content intentionally, as well as those proactively looking for the groups.
I mean, ultimately, the whole point of, if you and your partner start to discuss having children and starting a family, and you're unable to for whatever reason, that is a bit like grief and loss. You're ultimately going through a traumatic experience. So again, it's just that kind of safe space. And I think it's such an isolating thing, because obviously as couples, how do you talk to people about the fact that you're now starting to try? Is it something that's out in the open? And actually sometimes what you hear is, obviously when your friends have been lucky enough to start their own family, they have been, they update you once they've become pregnant. And I think so it's very daunting, and you're very isolated. So it's just that point again where, if you're having issues or challenges, it's not just waiting for a call from the NHS or doctor or anything like that. There is a space that you can listen to other people's stories and maybe possibly speak to other people about yours. So I think all of these things are really good. And the more podcasts that there are, the more information, the more accounts on Instagram sharing, it's, you know, becomes much easier for people that are going through it or thinking about starting and potentially having some challenges or some issues.
Do the NHS do much? Obviously, they support people in the moment when they proactively reach out, but is there anything they do, you know, if amongst their sort of pregnancy literature or starting for a baby literature, like do they proactively talk about male infertility?
Not that I'm aware of. It's something
Okay.
that I'm trying to, yeah, kind of campaign on, I guess. You know, it's in basically attending that appointment, going for a semen analysis recently, and realizing that there was no information, no communication on there. That there's a lot that the NHS could be doing as a start. I mean, but even now, you know, in the mental health sector that I work in, I work alongside the NHS talking therapies, and only now are they doing kind of talking therapies that people can access for free, where there are long waiting lists, there's lots of things, but they've only just started doing a specific postpartum course for women that have had children and potentially are kind of postnatal depression. And
Yeah.
that's only just starting out kind of, you know, now in recent years. So there's a lot of work to do and a lot that can be done for the males.
So at what point then did you decide to transition into coaching and supporting dads through infertility?
Again, I think it was just kind of natural, essentially, as you
Yeah.
know, working in the sector that I do, I talk a lot to people and I have a lot of experience kind of supporting individuals from a coaching capacity. And that was, you know, started out as people looking for work. But then in this, where I was processing my own kind of trauma, processing what I had been through, that led me to speaking to different people on different podcasts. And that then led me to having kind of group conversations with people that wanted to become dads or dads as well. And it's kind of just gone from there where I'm open to anybody having a chat, reaching out. They can message, they can arrange a call, whatever's needed. The majority of the stuff that I do is kind of insta lives, and we have different
Okay.
guests on, and have kind of open conversations. And that the numbers are quite small, but again, I think people see it after the fact. They don't always tune in live because obviously you can see who's on. So again, I know that there's people that are kind of watching it afterwards. I know there's people that reach out and talk about the impact that it's made, and then I've had lots of conversations afterwards with individuals as well. But there's definitely more to do. But yeah, because it again, and I took a bit of a break from January or over January, just because actually you kind of reliving that experience, constantly talking about it. So I did it for a
Yeah.
year, maybe over a year, and then I thought, okay, let me pause. And then a few things just clicked into place. I had a couple of newspapers reach out asking about articles, a couple of people that were putting things together for the kind of fertility community and asked me to get involved. And then we had tried to arrange this conversation last year, and then I got an email that you were starting season 2, and I just thought, well, okay, it's March now, I've had a bit of a pause, let's get back on the saddle, as it were. But I think every now and again you just need that break, because ultimately I'm just standing there talking constantly about being infertile, and I think it can have an impact on your head. So I just wanted to kind of enjoy the time that I had that I was having with the
Yeah.
kids and whatnot. Yeah.
And obviously, living it, you're probably thinking sharing the same message over and over again. But obviously, just appreciate it is reaching different audiences and different dads. And I know you said the lives often are quite low numbers, but I guess you just need to reach that one person, don't you?
Yeah.
And that one person might not even like it. They might not even comment, but it will reach them. So yeah, I guess that hopefully that can motivate you to keep showing up. But yeah, it can be difficult in amongst real life parenting work to keep showing up on social media and sharing. It can be a lot,
Yeah.
can't it?
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, I think as well, like, without getting too deep for a Monday, but I think what really interested me in your podcast and why I've been kind of an avid listener is just listening to different people's experience. Because I always found that going through finally getting the opportunity to have children, there was that one part of I didn't think I could conceive, and then we were able to have children through ICSI. But then also is like this point of, well, there's one thing where it was like, okay, but at one stage people were, if you were unable to have a child, there would have been nothing that you could do, and therefore there would just be some people that were lucky. And then there's now this where you can go through, and the kind of medical support that you can get allows you to become a parent, which
Yeah.
I am very, very grateful for. But I think also this part that's kind of played a big role in my thinking over the year and a half, where it's been really difficult, and the parts that, there's been no sleep, the challenges that you have as a parent and everything else, and that constant thought of I should be just 100% grateful the whole
Oh,
time.
I know.
And then you're like, but then you still find all of the bits challenging, and you still find all the bits where it's stressful at work, and you come home and it's stressful, and then there's a lack of sleep.
Yeah, my wife and I, when so Mia's 15 months now, but before we even conceived Mia, at that point we'd had 4 first trimester losses. We had a daughter that was born at 5 months, that didn't make it, and there was a point in time where we thought, it's just going to be us and Luca, which we were super thankful for, but we went privately to sort of dive into what was going on, because we had to pause trying because it was getting ridiculous. Literally, we'd see a pregnancy test and it would just disappear. So we were like, right, let's just pause. We'll go private. And I remember our private consultant saying, you will have more children. The blocker is going to be how much heartbreak you can endure. And we were like, right, are we ready to move forward? And we both committed, and thankfully, with the help of the private clinic, Mia was born. But it doesn't change the fact that at 4 a.m. when you're woken for the 4th time and you've got no sleep, in that moment you should be super grateful, because at one point in time we didn't think we'd ever have any more children. But it doesn't change the fact. But the guilt is real, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%, definitely. It is. It really is. And catch yourself sometimes thinking, God, but you couldn't have had any. You might not have had any of this. There's also the flip side of that, is where people sort of say you need to enjoy every moment as well, and that's a big one
Yeah.
that we had at the beginning, and that's also very difficult to do.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't even talked about the fact that you had 2 little ones born at the same time.
Yeah.
How was that, navigating with twins? Or is that just all, I guess that's all isn't it?
I mean, I find it staggering, and again, when I think about it, it's like, thinking about parents, and now with the twins, I was thrown in at the deep end, I think, and ultimately I see when people have singletons, like, I feel that dads really need to take an extra step to be kind of proactive and be a hands-on dad. Like, there
Okay.
weren't enough hands for my partner for both of our children, so ultimately, I was able to feed, I was able to help with feeding through the nights, I was able to help with cuddles and all the rest of it. And I think I count myself very lucky on that sense, because I think I always worried a little bit about how the normal thing about how you're going to interact with your child and how they're
Yeah.
going to feel about you. And I feel like this gave me a bit of a kind of head start, as it were, because there wasn't a choice. Like, one of the children had to kind of spend time with me and everything else. So I find myself, yeah, I am grateful for that. I think to have kind of had the opportunity to really get to know them both, and it is hard though. It had been quite difficult, especially where you get like one does sleep and the other one not sleeping, and one does eat, the other one not eating. One's really happy, one's crying, and it has been, yeah, it has been a kind of long road. But we're at a point, I think, where it's a wonderful period. They're sleeping a bit more, and they're kind of really taking an interest in things. So they're both 18 months at the moment.
Oh,
Um,
amazing.
I think, again, ultimately though, like, even before all of that, like, there was a real risk. They were born 3 months premature,
Yeah.
because they weren't getting enough. One wasn't getting enough fluid, and I think the whole time it was risky. Like, for us to get the twins, both of them. Again, we were really lucky. But yeah, it's been full on, and I think again, I listen to. I always have an interest in different dads sharing their experience, because they can all be very different. Um, but yeah, I think it's just that my big thing has been about trying to maximize every opportunity every time with them, and so I've been consistent, and I've been trying to have that work-life balance. Like, I don't try and bring
Yeah.
work home, I try and get in, and it has been difficult and has been challenging, but it has been very, very rewarding, very rewarding.
Yeah. And you're probably in now that phase of the toddler years, which, are they both walking now and into
Yeah,
everything, want to
yeah.
touch and explore everything? So the fact that you've got
Climb
that
in it.
twice, yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah, the
that way you
fact,
walk into a room and one goes left and the other one goes right. It's just, yeah, it can be manic, but again, they get on most of the time. um, and they're kind of picking up words and everything now. It's really an interesting time. I think I love this part. I've loved every bit of it, but I think this bit, they're really interested in words, seeing things for the first time. Like, it is quite magical.
yeah, yeah, because our oldest is going to be 6 next week. And
Yeah,
he was 2 just as we went into the first lockdown, and I always look back on those, or that 2 year period, fondly, because he was into everything, but because it was lockdown, when we were able to actually get out and about, we would just throw a puddle suit on him, put his wellies on, and I just watch him like run around and explore. Obviously you've got that twice, but
yeah,
yeah, it is a magical time for sure.
yeah. I saw your video. You put a video together or edited some moments a few weeks ago, or a month or two ago, of
Okay.
that time, I think. And that I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, yeah, I'm just getting into this. I was rubbing my hands at the time. I was like, yeah, here we go, here we go.
Yeah, well, because obviously we were working from home, and before that, I'd have an hour commute into Cardiff and an hour back. So I basically had 10 hours back in the week, which was ridiculous. So I just made it my
Amazing.
mission. As soon as I started my first call, I would just take him out, put his puddle suit on, let him get a bit messy. Yeah, and now
Lovely.
obviously he's 6. He's in school a lot of the time, and I'm glad I did that and captured as much of that
Yeah,
time as I can. Um,
yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm
Um,
looking forward to the spring and the summer, because ultimately now I'll get that bit before work where it's nice and light outside, and a bit afterwards because it's been dark and miserable, and I think can't really do much. So it's coming up to a nice time of year, I think.
Yeah, we're getting signs of it. Yeah, I am ready for the spring and the summer for sure. I did want to lean on you a little bit and see if you could share, obviously working with other dads and your own experience. What are sort of some of the common misconceptions when it comes to male infertility and IVF? Like, do people sort of underappreciate the impact it has on the dad?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's two paramount ones. There's one, I guess, which is dad's not expecting it to be them. And ultimately,
Yeah.
that can either go one of two ways: an overconfidence, or a reluctance to go and get tested. And I think that that's a big barrier. And so ultimately, again, is like trying to normalize it for dads to go and get checked out as early as possible. Um, but ultimately, I think that there is a huge decline, and actually, this has become something that's more popular in the papers at the moment. There was a TV show, Celebrity Save Our Sperm, on Channel 4 about 3 4 months ago. There's a decline in sperm health at the moment, and
Oh,
I
okay.
think that not many males are really thinking about it as much as they should do. Um, Seeing a big one around, everybody knows and probably has talked at one time or another of the female body clock, but it's exactly the same for dads as well. And if, yeah, males, as they get older, that is happening. Like, there is a natural decline too. So for me, the first starter point though is definitely that kind of, it takes a little while for men to go and get checked out, when
Mm,
they could have gone sooner, and they could have potentially changed their diet to be able um, to see whether they can improve their sperm health. But ultimately, as well, because of the NHS, and because it's not something that is seen as urgent care, if there is an issue, challenge that is health related that you need an operation for, that operation you could be on a waiting list for a year to 2 years. So ultimately, if you're talking about having those conversations with your partner and wanting to start a family, obviously the time then it takes between you finally going, getting tested, and then potentially having an operation, you're talking 3-4 years. And again, it's that point of, you know, lots of stress in between. So, and that the NHS doesn't help with that, because like I say, when I went in, they didn't talk about some of the reasonings. They just said, you're not going to conceive naturally, go to IVF. Whereas actually there were 3 kind of steps. I could have had an ultrasound, and like today, 2 years on, we were talking about whether or not there was a varicocele, which is a vein over one testicle which kind of heats up the testicle, and that means a decrease in sperm health. That you can have an operation on a varicocele and recover within 4 months, and from start to finish, from me going to the IVF clinic to then having our children was 4 months. So actually I could have recovered in that space of time if I'd had the operation. But there's a few different things. So yeah, that's a bit of a waffle, but to summarize, it is kind of, you know, dads going along and getting checked out. This is not a female issue. And yeah, making sure, you know, it could be something where you can change your diet to improve sperm quality. But if it's not, if it's something that is health related, then, you know, you need to join, you'll end up joining a waiting list, and that can be time consuming.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually, because it feels like you need to be having those conversations around sperm health 10, 12 years earlier, which is why I think you're in a really unique position, because obviously on Instagram you share about, you know, stand-up comedy, football, and some of your content might reach the younger demographic, maybe the lads who are, you know, into football, stand-up comedy, and, you know, there's no reason those guys can't be having the conversation about, oh, maybe these, you know, life decisions I'm making aren't beneficial if longer term, you know, my goal is to start a family.
Exactly that, Tom. Definitely. I think the earlier we hit people thinking about this, and if you remember in your kind of sexual health classes at school, they basically told you that if you don't wear a condom, you'll get someone pregnant or you'll get an STD. Whereas in actual fact, there could be more done in schools around looking after your testicles, looking after your sperm health, so that when you come to starting a family, you can have the best opportunity to have kind of optimal sperm. And I think that comes with kind of making this as popular as possible. Like Rod Gilbert just 2 years ago did a documentary on the BBC about his infertility, and those are so helpful, because like you say, you know, it's kind of popular among the laddie lads looking at football, looking at comedy, and thinking about it, whereas it's not a common conversation for men. And in fact, like school playground spaces, if you kind of talk about trying for a baby and it taking a while, you're more likely to get ridiculed, and you kind of, you know, you're firing blanks than an arm around the shoulder and is everything okay. So I think it's needing to change those perceptions, but also giving people the knowledge of who to talk to and when, because it is, you know, it is something that can happen. It's as if to catch that wider audience, as if the core message needs to be about male infertility, but you sort of need to package it up a little bit, like the documentary you mentioned on the BBC. You sort of bring them in with the football or the comedy, and then obviously get them talking about other topics such as male infertility. Yeah, exactly. And actually, the comedy thing for me was a point of work related. I went to check it out to see whether this comedy for thought thing would be positive for some of our clients, and then ultimately started in there and did a couple of weeks worth of the course, and realised I actually had loads that I hadn't processed, that I hadn't thought about, that I needed to kind of get rid of. And that led me to do some comedy stand-up, which I really enjoyed, as much as it was really tough and kind of, it was difficult, but made a few people laugh. But ultimately, it, you know, was talking about things that were really close and personal to me. And hopefully, you know, one person in that room, one person that's watched the YouTube video might go home and have a conversation with a mate about it, or, you know, might feel more comfortable. And that's the whole thing, is just having more people feeling comfortable an open space for them to share and talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of, because you mentioned something a few questions ago, navigating sort of the mental impact on yourself when you're going through it, because people just would assume maybe, you're trying to process the infertility and the impact that has on you starting a family. But I think all dads feel a level of guilt when their partner is navigating through pregnancy, because you feel a little bit out of touch, like maybe there's not enough you can do for them. But I guess there's another layer on top for you, isn't there? Because obviously you've got to watch your partner go through the IVF process before even getting to the pregnancy stage. How do you process and navigate through that?
I think it just went from one, and that's why it was so important when I did the comedy thing and realised that I hadn't actually unlocked or processed any of it. Like, you go from one step to the next. Like, ultimately it was,
Right,
okay,
yeah.
we're now going to look for a clinic, and then the clinic told us exactly what to do and when, and then all of a sudden we were pregnant, and then we found out it was twins, and then there was all sorts of health complications with that, and then they were going to be premature, and then they were on neonatal ward, and the whole time you're spent thinking about partner, the babies, and whether everything's going to be okay. That actually then, when I got the opportunity to kind of untap a little bit about how I was, maybe I hadn't done a whole heap of that during, but I think I needed to just go through all of those elements, like, and make sure that obviously partner was okay. But yeah, it was weird. I guess I just kind of held a lot of it in, and it was really good to be able to process it at the end. But this is also why it's so important at any point just to be able to talk about it throughout those experiences. And for other people, it's actually just listening. So, as you're becoming an expectant father, having the opportunity to listen to your podcast or other podcasts. But there weren't a lot for dads. And even when I was thinking about, okay, well, what steps of the pregnancy is there that I need to be aware of? I had to listen to, I think it was Jessie Ware, but there wasn't anything that I could find that was just specific to like dads but making it relatable for dads and what the partner was going to be going through. So again, I think it's that bit of, obviously all the care and attention is on the mum, and that is completely fair. But I think, more around what the dad can do, what to be prepared for, and tapping into lots of different ways of communicating that to lots of different guys, basically.
So before we close out, I've just got 3 quick-fire questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So don't overthink them. But the first question is, knowing what you know now, what parenting advice would you give yourself before you became a parent?
Oh, knowing what I know now. I think ultimately just take each day as it comes. I think that the whole try and enjoy every moment is not possible. There are some really rough parts, but there are some absolute glorified moments throughout. And I guess just know that tomorrow could be a whole new day. And those horrible moments where you didn't sleep and they didn't eat or they didn't do something or lots of crying might not happen the next day. Don't think each day is going to be exactly the same as the one that you've just had.
Yeah. And those difficult phases can be super intense, can't they? But no phase lasts forever. If that's anything for any parent to hold on to, they do pass. Obviously, more difficult phases will come in the future. What's the one thing you feel you need to work on as a parent?
Oh, very good. I currently am very aware of how, if I'm feeling stressed for any reason, that presents itself in my childcare abilities.
Okay.
And I'm really at the moment trying to work on an awareness of that. I feel like I can get quite short-tempered, with anything in any time, but I suffer with it afterwards if I've kind of act irritably with the children.
It sticks with you.
None the wiser. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm really trying to process it at the time. Again, maybe this is the reason why I applied to come on here, to hold myself to account. But yeah, that's the one thing at the moment that, and I am catching myself, and I am trying to think about whether or not, okay, what has actually happened? Is it that bad? And
Yeah.
why are you feeling a bit more stressed and running around and flapping or whatnot? Like, just take a breath.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's unbelievable. The fact that you even acknowledge that is probably the hardest step anyway, isn't it? So you're aware of it, which is the biggest step. What's the best thing for you about being a parent?
Wow, very good one to finish on. What is the best thing? I think twofold. One, if I had any thoughts about my parents and any judgments on my part as their parenting, I get to attempt to either do it as well as or better than they did, or I get to do things which I thought maybe they should have done. And that's not to say that my parents, what if they, I'm sure that my mum would give this a lesson. I think that ultimately, like, my parents were absolutely, they tried their best, and there were some really amazing elements that they did very well, and I've turned out the way that I have, so very thankful for that. Um,
Yeah.
but I think, yeah, also it's a lot of fun. It's like ultimately this kind of my personality, and um, seeing that in two other little people, like just being aware of life and seeing it from them kind of developing and growing. And I think that that's something that's I really love, like at the moment, the phase that they're in, where they're watching and learning, and I'm like, there is a part of me when I'm reading a book where I'm getting them to do things, where I'm showing them, like yesterday or the last weekend, we kind of saw loads of worms after it had rained, and you're going out and you're pointing and you're creating these magical moments. And I
Yeah.
just think that I really am absolutely loving that. Yeah, I just it's really wonderful and like eye opening that you're creating these, that they're gonna grow and their personality is gonna be part of the reason because of this journey that they've had at the beginning, these like magical
Yeah.
magical moments.
It is amazing watching them thrive, especially at the age you're in now, the 18 months, because, like you say, just seeing a worm is everything to them, isn't it?
Mind blowing, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess as well, like the reason why I found I'm really trying, and the reason why I'm beta twin dad on social media is actually because I wanted to approach it with open eyes, like everything new to me, like parenting. I
Okay.
don't know anything, and therefore, I wanted to attempt different things, and I think I'm trying to be very conscious of that as they are developing. Like, I'm an Arsenal fan, absolutely love football. I would love nothing else than to, in 12, 13 years' time, have season tickets and go to the football with them. But at the same time, I want them to find that themselves. I don't want it to be
Yeah.
because I've kind of pushed or encouraged in certain things. So I catch myself when I'm singing Arsenal at the top of my voice, and I think that these moments are just that point of I can create little bits and they can find out what it is that they enjoy, and then I can be
Yeah.
there as part of the course, like for whatever they decide to do. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's all a learning for me as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they teach us just as much as we're able to teach them. But you make such a good point, and it becomes more apparent as they get older. Certainly, Luca's almost 6, and you have sort of preconceived ideas what you'd like to introduce them to. But I think, yeah, as a parent, like football, I played football for like 15 years, and I was keen to get Luca into football, and I've held that back until
Yeah,
recently. He's been badgering to me to take him football training, so it took a while for us
amazing.
to commit to it. But I've been speaking to one of the local managers of a team, and because I didn't want to throw him into football matches at 6,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
thankfully they just do some light training for 6-year-olds. So we're going to start with that, but again, absolutely no pressure. He's just going to a field to kick a ball around, and we'll see how that progresses for him. But yeah, it's about
yeah.
just give,
Nice.
other than maybe swimming, which I see as like a non-negotiable. We
Yeah,
need to learn how to swim. Um,
yeah.
the rest of the time is just about dipping his toe into different things and seeing what sort of takes his fancy.
Yeah, amazing.
Cool. Well, I'll let you go, Frank, but thank you for joining me, mate. It's such an important message, and I really do hope you continue. It can be difficult showing up on social media, but if you're focused on a core message and you're able to share that, you are making a huge difference. So I hope you keep showing up.
Much appreciated, Tom. And as I say, much appreciated for your podcast, sharing your journey with us and continuing to get some fantastic guests. I do really love listening to it. So appreciate everything that you're doing.
Cool. Thank you, Frank, and hopefully we'll chat again in the future.
Look forward to it. Take care.
Cool. Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.